A city on a hill. Matthew 5 verse 14. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Here in this 5th, 6th and 7th chapters of Matthew, which is commonly called Christ's Sermon on the Mount, there is a summary of the practical part of Christianity. It is to be observed that as of old, the law of Moses was delivered on a mountain. The voice which God spoke, in which he gave the 10 Commandments, was from Mount Sinai. And Moses went up to God on the top of the mountain, and there God gave him the 2 tables of stone, on which were written the same commandments. And there also it was that God gave the judicial and ceremonial laws. And so also now Christ delivers the mind and will of God on a mountain. In the 1st and 2nd verses it is said, And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain. And when he was set, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and taught them. So that it appears that those that Christ did more especially direct himself to in this discourse were his disciples. And in what follows in this and the 2 next chapters we have an account what he taught them. And first he tells them in many instances who they are that are truly happy and blessed persons, or what is the way to true blessedness, namely that they should be poor in spirit, that they should be spiritual mourners, that they should be meek, that they should hunger and thirst after righteousness, that they should be merciful, that they should be pure in heart, that they should be peacemakers, that they should willingly and patiently endure persecution for righteousness' sake. Thus Christ enforces these things by the blessedness that attends them, and then in the 13th and following verses he adds some further enforcements or motives to influence his disciples to be of such a spirit and practice as he had spoken of. As particularly he tells them they are the salt of the earth. They are persons chosen and called out from the rest of the world, that they might purify themselves and keep the world from corruption. And therefore they had need to be pure and holy, and of an excellent disposition and practice themselves. Otherwise they would be worse than others, and their guilt much greater in the sight of God. If the salt have lost its savour, it is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out. And in the 14th verse, the verse of the text, he tells them that they are the light of the world, and compares them to a city that is set on a hill that can't be hid. This was verified of the disciples in a degree before Christ's death. They, by reason of their being the professed followers of such an extraordinary person as Christ was, who was so remarkable for his doctrine and miracles, were greatly observed and taken notice of. But this was more especially verified of them after his resurrection, when the Spirit of God came to be so wonderfully poured out upon them, and so remarkably accompanied their preaching. It was so remarkable a thing that they were upon that account extraordinarily observed and taken notice of in Judea, and not only so, but all over the world. What Christ here says to his disciples is not to be understood only of those that were then his disciples, but of his church and people, then and afterwards, for they were all his disciples. And we have an account of the remarkable fulfilling of it in the book of Acts, of the great noise that was made in all parts of the world, from the remarkable flourishing of religion that there was, and a great increase of the Christian church. The church then was in a remarkable manner as a city set on a hill. Doctrine. When any professing society is as a city set on a hill, 'tis a very great obligation upon them to honour religion in their practice. I would speak to this doctrine first by briefly showing how a Christian society may be as a city set on a hill. Second, give the reasons why, when they are so, 'tis a very great obligation on them. 1. Briefly show how any professing people may be said to be as a city set on a hill. and in the general, a professing society may be said to be as a city set on a hill, when they, as to what pertains to their profession, are remarkably set forth to public notice and observation, when there is that in them, or in their circumstances, or anything belonging to them that is very remarkable, and is of great fame far and near, anything that does very much draw the observation of others, and causes them much to be taken notice of, when others have a great deal of opportunity and great occasion to observe them, when they are very much heard of and talked of and much observed, then may they be said to be as a city set on a hill. The occasion of this must be something very remarkable and distinguishing, as a city set on a hill stands on distinguished ground, above the level of the common surface of the earth. The place is eminent and lifted up, and this sets it forth to view. It can be seen a great way off, and its prospects invites and draws the observation of all that pass by. It can't be hid, and no other can be expected than that all should observe it. No other can be expected than that those that are around it, or that come near it, should see what a sort of city it is. If it be a magnificent city, full of stately buildings, that will be taken notice of. If it be meanly built, and the houses or walls broken down, that will be observed. And what kind of city it is, as to the beauty and magnificence of it, will be known. So when a professing people have something appertaining to them, whereby they are very much distinguished from others, that will draw the notice and observation of the world upon them, because mankind are wont to take great notice of things that are strange and singular, and by which either a person or people are distinguished from others. Anything that is new or very unusual, it makes the stronger impression on people's minds, and more powerfully influences their curiosity and draws their attention. Thus, when Christ made his last entrance into Jerusalem, and came in a very unusual manner, riding on a colt, and the people spread their garments and branches of trees in the way, and the multitudes crying, Hosanna to the Son of David, we read in Matthew 21:10 that the whole city was moved, saying, Who is this? There are three distinguishing things especially that make a professing people or society as a city set on a hill. First, when their profession is distinguishing. The profession of a people may be distinguishing in two respects. One, when they profess that which is different in its kind and nature from what the generality of others do profess. If they profess doctrines that differ from those that others do, or profess a different kind of religion. Thus it was with the disciples, whom Christ says are as a city set on a hill. They differed from all the world in their profession. They professed faith in Jesus of Nazareth as the true Messiah and Saviour of mankind, and the doctrines of redemption that he taught. Herein their profession distinguished them from the Jews, who did not believe that Christ was the Messiah. It also distinguished them from the heathen, who professed other gods and other mediators. Christ crucified was to the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. 1 Corinthians 1 verse 23. This made them as a city set on a hill. They were much the more observed and taken notice of in their differing so from all the world in professing a crucified Saviour. And sometimes the people, though they don't differ from other people in the doctrines they profess, yet they differ from them as to those things that they mainly insist on as the most essential things, and differ from many others as to what they think it most to be looked at in order to eternal salvation, which may cause them to be much taken notice of. The disciples in their profession were distinguished from the Jews in this respect. The Jews, they professed that we ought to obey all God's commandments, that we should observe the ceremonial law, even in the minutest parts of it, even to paying tithe of mint and anise and cumin. and also they profess that men ought to seek judgment, mercy, and faith. And so did the disciples profess the same things. But herein they differed, that the Jews laid the greatest weight on those ceremonial observances, but the disciples laid the greatest weight on judgment, mercy, and faith. Matthew 23:23. Such a difference as this in the profession of a people from other people will tend to make them the objects of distinguishing notice. 2. When they make an higher profession than other people, or when they are distinguished as to the degree of what they profess, when they profess greater degrees of holiness than others, or that greater numbers of them are holy, when they make a profession of having greater degrees of the presence of God with them, of God having done more for them, and of greater mercies that God has bestowed upon them than on other people, when there is a far greater number among them that do make profession of special experiences and of extraordinary light, that they have had, when they make profession of greater acquaintance with God and more communion with him, and of greater hopes of what God will do for them hereafter, and of the happiness that they expect to be admitted to, when there is a greater manifestation and show of religion in their talk and discourse. Hereby a people are set forth to the notice of others. Such a people will be much observed. Some will observe and watch them out of a spirit of pride. There is such a disposition in the hearts of men that if others profess to be better than they, that it is cross to them. They naturally dislike it and are averse to it, that others should count themselves better than they, and there is a secret resentment of it when others make such a profession, and this resentment will stir them up to observe them diligently and watch for their halting. And such a profession does also excite the observation of those that are of a good spirit, that would be glad if their profession were true. They will observe them to see whether it be true or no. Second, another thing that makes a professing society as a city set on a hill is their being distinguished by any remarkable works that God has wrought among them. Thus the children of Israel in Egypt and in the wilderness were distinguished. God did wonderful things for them in Egypt, and at the Red Sea and in the wilderness, and this was heard of by the nations of Canaan, and in all the nations round about, and drew their observation and notice. And so it was with respect to the Christians or disciples of Christ after his resurrection. God wrought wonderful and marvellous things among them. He remarkably poured out his Spirit at Pentecost and filled them with extraordinary and miraculous gifts. So did God continue in a wonderful manner to set in with the preaching of the apostles and evangelists at Samaria, at Antioch, at Iconium, Ephesus and Corinth, and many other places, which drew the observation of all the world on this sort of people. They were all intent upon them to observe what sort of people this was, of whom they heard such wonderful things. And so it is still when God appears in any very remarkable and very wonderful works amongst a people. It draws the attention and observation of good and bad. For those that know not what it is, yet it appears something strange, and this excites their observation. The godly will observe them, as rejoicing in the great works of God towards them, and desiring to see the good fruits of it. Others will observe them, some out of curiosity, and some from envy, as hoping to something amiss in them. The third and last thing I shall mention that makes a professing people to be as a city set on a hill is a remarkable influence that they or anything in them has had upon others, when either their extraordinary profession or any extraordinary work of God among them has had a great and remarkable influence on others round about, to make a great alteration among them, to awaken them and reform them, and to cause religion to flourish among them. This does remarkably tend to draw the eyes of the world on such a people or society. So it was with respect to the disciples and primitive Christians. God wonderfully poured out his Spirit on them, which was of a great influence on others through all parts of the then known world. They were made the means of others in vast multitudes being awakened and converted. The pouring out of the Spirit began at Jerusalem, and from thence it spread into other cities in that land and in all parts of the world. The law went forth out of Zion, and the word of God from Jerusalem, agreeable to Isaiah 2 verse 3. The Spirit of God seems at first to have been poured out on those that had been the disciples of Christ while he lived here on earth, and they thereby had great influence on others to the conversion of many thousands. Thus fixed the eyes of the world upon them, and they were greatly taken notice of and observed everywhere. And so Paul and those that were with him became noted and renowned from the great influence they had had on others. Thus they say of them, Acts 17 verse 6, "These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also." And so sometimes it is with respect to others. A professing society is sometimes as a city set on a hill on that account, by reason of the great and extensive influence that they have, or what is seen in them or heard of them has on others. I proceed now to the second thing proposed, namely to give the reasons why, when a people are thus as a city set on a hill, 'tis a very great obligation on them to honour religion by an holy and amiable practice. For this end was it that Christ told his disciples that they were as a city set on an hill, namely to convince them of their obligation of being such and living as such as he had been speaking of, namely that they should be poor in spirit, spiritual mourners, meek, that they should hunger and thirst after righteousness, that they should be merciful, pure in heart, peacemakers, willingly and patiently enduring persecutions for righteousness' sake. And it lays a great obligation on any professing society on the following accounts. First, if such a people don't honour religion by their practice, they will above all people appear inconsistent with themselves. For as their great and extraordinary profession of religion is one thing, whereby they are thus set up to the view of the world, and if they thus set themselves up to view, and when they have done, don't hold forth the proper tokens and fruits of that which they profess, they will, above all people, act contrary to their own profession, and contrary to what God and all mankind might justly expect from their profession and look for. Their profession is eminent and higher than others, and therefore if they are consistent with themselves, they will be eminent in their practice. Second, when God sets up a professing society as a city on a hill, he does it so that they may honour religion by their practice. If God distinguishes them from other people by what he does for them or among them, and so sets them up to the view of the world, 'tis a call of God to them that way to honour him before the world. This we are taught in the next verse to the text. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. To what end does a man light a candle and set it up in plain sight, not under a bushel, but on a candlestick, but that it may give light to all that are in a house? So to what end does God distinguish a professing people with extraordinary mercy and set them up to the view of the world? But that they may be the light of the world, that they may show forth God's praises in the sight of those in whose view they are set. As in the first clause of the verse of the text, ye are the light of the world. But how can such a people be a light to the world, but only by causing their light so to shine before men, that others, seeing their good works, may show forth God's praise? As it follows in the 16th verse, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Third, a professing people or society that is thus set up, if they do thus, may do more good, and by the contrary may do more hurt than any other people. As they are thus set up on a hill, so they are under advantage to do either more good or more hurt than any people in the world that are not set on a hill as they are. If they carry themselves unsuitably and unchristianly and contrary to their profession, their carriage will do vastly more hurt than the like ill carriages of other people. It will be abundantly more to God's dishonour and to the dishonour of religion, because they, being distinguished to the eye of the world by the profession and shows of religion that are amongst them, the world looks to them to form a judgment of that religion which they profess. By the fruits they see in them, and will have either honourable or dishonourable thoughts of religion by what they see. And if such people show forth the praises of God, and the amiableness of true religion by their walk and conversation, so that Christianity appears in them untainted, and not marred and defiled, but in its native beauty and excellency, they may thereby do more towards giving credit and reputation to religion and promoting of it amongst others than any other people in the world that are not so set up and distinguished. Because they, being set on high, what is to be seen in them that is honourable to religion is seen further, and much more notice is taken of it. This will tend to cause that the works that God has wrought among them shall have their due effects in others' minds, to stir them to such after a like blessing. It will tend to convince the world that God is in them of a truth, and that the work they behold is indeed the work of God, and so cause them to fall down on their face and worship God. We have seen lately what a great influence the beholding of the great and wonderful works of God in a people have on other people, when once they are convinced of the reality of it. But nothing has so great a tendency to convince persons as this. Fourth, such a people are under obligations thus to do as they would regard their own honour and reputation. A people ought to have regard to their own honour, otherwise God never would have encouraged his people, that he would put honour upon them in the sight of others, as Joshua 3 verse 7 and Deuteronomy 4 verse 6 and many other places, and threatened the wicked with bringing them to reproach and disgrace. When God thus exalts a people and makes them as a city that is set on a hill, God exercises distinguishing grace and favour unto them by the honour he puts upon them, and he gives them advantage of appearing with peculiar and distinguished honour in the sight of all that do behold them, if they will but show forth fruits answerable to what God has done for them. This is the way to obtain the high esteem and great respect of all wise and solemn persons, and even to be reverenced in the heart of the wicked, whose consciences will necessarily bear a testimony to the honourableness of such things as they see in them. The more persons are set up to the view of the world, the more does it concern them to appear so as may be to their honour, because what is either to their honour or disgrace is more publicly known and generally observed. They do the more extensively obtain credit by what is honourable in them, and are more extensively dishonoured when that appears in them which is disagreeable to their profession and dishonourable. Christ seems plainly to have respect to this in the text. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid, but as much as to say, if you don't behave yourselves well, you can't hide it, for you are as a city that is set on a hill, and it will be observed by all about you to your shame and reproach. And such a people that make such an high profession, if they don't walk answerable, are exposed to greater reproach than others, because of their high pretences. A man or people that don't pretend to much is not had in that contempt as he that pretends to much, and appears indeed to have but little. 'Tis so in everything. If a person makes a great pretence to wisdom and knowledge, but appears upon acquaintances to be a fool, he is more exposed abundantly to be despised and ridiculed than a man of but mean ability, and never pretended to anything great. And so 'tis with respect to goodness. He that makes profession of being eminently good and better than others, if to the observation of bystanders he appears no better, but to be a very ill man, he lies much more liable to disgrace and contempt than he that makes no pretences beyond what he is. Application 1. The first uses of instruction in 3 inferences. First, hence we need not wonder if such a people, if they fail of suitably honouring religion in their practice, should be exercised with temporal judgments and frowns, as much or more than other people, because if their obligations are exceeding great, as has been observed, then their guilt will also be peculiarly great, if they notably fail of doing as they are obliged. The honour of God's holy name suffers more from such a people than others, if they carry it unsuitably, and therefore it will not be to be wondered at if God should cause them to suffer in their temporal interest more than others. Their sins are attended with more than ordinary ingratitude for mercies, and therefore it will be no wonder if God withholds and cuts them short of temporal mercies, that they need to correct them for their ingratitude, and that the many of them may be truly converted and may be God's children. God's own people do by their unsuitable and ungrateful carriage expose themselves as much to temporal calamities as any persons whatsoever. What great and sure calamities did David meet with for his ingratitude? Yea, God oftentimes lets others alone in their sins, and lets them to go on and prosper when he will correct his own children, and a people that have been remarkably distinguished and set on high as a city set on a hill are more exposed to temporal chastisements if they dishonour God's name by unworthy carriages than any people whatsoever. Amos 3 verse 2. You only have I known of all the families that are on the earth, therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. And if we in this town, whom God has of late remarkably set up as a city on an hill, should carry ourselves so as remarkably to dishonour that profession we make, there seems to be no people that will be more exposed to temporal chastisements. To whom much is given, of him shall be much required. If a man has been abundantly kind to a child or servant, much will be required of him. Second, hence we may learn that if such a people or society do remarkably dishonour religion by their behaviour, what danger there will be that God will for the future withhold such mercies as he has bestowed. God has indeed mercy sufficient to overlook and forgive this and all sins, however aggravated, but yet persons may greatly expose themselves by abuse of past mercies to the judgment of being denied future mercies. And if the obligation be so great, then the provocation will be answerably great. And if God has set a people high in the sight of the world, but they don't improve their exalted state to his honour, it will be no wonder if God should thrust them down low into the dirt, and make them an hissing and perpetual reproach. Third, if there be any particular persons in such a society that do in an especial manner bring great and public dishonour on the profession of that society, this doctrine may teach how great their guilt must needs be, when there has been a great and very remarkable work of God amongst a people. The notable miscarriages and unsuitable and wicked behaviour of a few particular professors may very much wrong the credit and reputation of the whole work, and all the profession that is made. These inferences are known abroad, and the world is ready to pass their judgment of all the rest, what they see in them. And this is one way wherein that is verified in Ecclesiastes 9 verse 18. One sinner destroys much good, but when it is so, the guilt of such persons must needs be exceeding great, because it robs God in a great measure of the honour of so great a work, and darkens the light of the whole society, and brings a great discredit on religion in general. One such professor that carries himself thus unsuitably in such a society may do as much hurt to the interest of religion as 100 other wicked men, and how much greater then must we conclude his guilt will be than the guilt of others. Here that place may well be applied in Matthew 18 verse 7. It must needs be that offences come, but woe to that man by whom the offence cometh. 2. I come now particularly to apply this doctrine to the case of this town. This town is in a remarkable degree such a society as is spoken of in the text and doctrine. It has been so in a considerable degree formerly. It has in time past been a town of an higher profession, and more noted for the works which God has wrought in it than most towns, if not than any town in the land. But it is become more remarkably so of late, by means of the late wonderful pouring out of the Spirit of God upon us. God has hereby set us up on high to the view and observation of the world. We are as a city set upon a hill in all those ways that have been mentioned. We are so by the distinguishing profession that we make, and we have been made so by the distinguishing and remarkable works that God hath wrought amongst us. And we have been made so by the great and remarkable influence that what has been seen and heard of amongst us, and the profession we make, has had on many other places. Though the whole work was the work of God, and we have nothing to attribute of it to ourselves, yet God was pleased evidently to make use of his own great and wonderful work here, as a means to stir up and awaken others all around us. And it has been improved by God as the occasion and means whereby he has begun a great and wonderful work in many other places, far and near. It has been with us very much as it was of old with the church of Thessalonica, 1 Thessalonians 1:7-8, so that ye were examples to all that believe in Macedonia and Achaia. For from you sounded out the word of the Lord, not only in Macedonia and Achaia, but also in every place your faith to Godward is spread abroad. The country in general was probably never so filled with talk of any work of such a nature. The fame of it spread abroad everywhere, and all sorts were earnestly inquiring about it. Some have inquired from real hearty concern for the kingdom of God, and have heartily rejoiced to hear of such a work, and others have inquired from curiosity, because it was so strange and unusual a thing. Others have inquired from something of concern in their own minds. They have been a little startled, and their hearts something touched by hearing the news of such a wonderful work of God. And others have inquired out of enmity against such a work. But the whole country has been filled from one end of it to the other, with the fame of what has been here done, and what is here professed, and the eyes of all the land have been drawn upon us to observe us, and everyone has been inquiring how the affair went on here, and after what manner the work was carried on, and what effect it has upon those that are the subjects of it, and how they behave themselves and the like, so that there probably never was any town in this land under so great obligation of that kind mentioned in the text and doctrine, to honour their profession by their practice, as this town. Here I would mention several things in particular respecting our being set as a city on a hill, which shows our extraordinary obligation to adorn our profession by our practice. First, we may consider the great and violent endeavours that Satan has used to hinder the credit of the work that has been wrought amongst us. The devil has seemingly extraordinarily to bestir himself to this purpose, for he knew that the bringing a reproach on this work of God would be the likeliest way to hinder the progress of it. Hell seems to be alarmed by the extraordinary breaking forth of the work of God here, and the sudden and swift propagation of it from town to town. The devils seem to have been all up in arms, if possible, to put a stop to it, and the way they have seemed chiefly to betake themselves to has been to destroy the credit of the work, to hinder people abroad from believing that it was a good work, and to possess them with ill thoughts of it. Thus you may remember that when the work was first begun in this town, that the neighbouring towns seemed to be filled almost with talk against it. Many would speak contemptibly of it. Some made a mean scoff and ridicule of it, and others that did not do so yet seemed to suspect it. And when God, notwithstanding, carried on his work, and in a little time carried it into the neighbouring towns, in spite of Satan's endeavours to prejudice them against it, then the devil seemed to be yet more alarmed, and to be more violent, and laboured to bring a reproach on this work of God, by the violent onsets that he made on some particular persons, by extraordinary temptation to mischief and destroy themselves, in which God in his sovereign providence was pleased to suffer him to prevail, especially in one instance, namely in that very awful disaster, the death of Mr. Hawley, by which Satan did seem in a great measure for the present to gain his end, namely to bring a blot upon the work of God amongst us. Another device of Satan to hurt the credit of this work, by which he has been no less successful, has been to lead away and deceive some particular professors by enthusiastical impressions and imaginations, which they have conceited were divine revelations, such as were wont to be given to the prophets of old. And the noise of this has been swiftly spread abroad in the country, to the great wounding of the credit of the work of God in this part of the land. And another device of Satan to hinder the credit of this work has been to fill the country with innumerable false and groundless reports. It has been astonishing to see how many strange and ridiculous stories have been carried abroad that have no foundation, and how that those things that have been in part true, that have been a blemish to religion amongst us, have been magnified and added to. And another thing wherein the spite and violence of Satan against the work of God here has been manifest, is the extraordinary means that have lately been used to cast an odium upon this country, and raise a kind of mobbish rage and fury against the ministry of the country, and to prejudice the minds of the country against them, especially those of them that have chiefly stood in the defence of those truths of the gospel, in which the late work of God amongst us has mainly depended. In this also God, in his holy providence, has suffered Satan to be in a great measure successful, as we have been well informed, to lessen the credit of the work of God amongst us. And in all it has been very evident that Satan's spite has been chiefly against Northampton, if possible, to beget a prejudice in the minds of the country against this town, which has been the original and principal seat of this work of God. If Satan therefore be so great in his endeavours to bring a discredit on this work of God, certainly we that have been so peculiarly favoured of God ought to be great in our endeavours to uphold and promote the credit of it. We may conclude that Satan knows that if this work be in credit, it will greatly tend to promote the glory of God and the interest of religion. Otherwise he would never so exert himself to hinder its being in credit. This should make us the more careful that we do nothing to discredit it, and that we do our utmost to promote the reputation of it. And there is no way in the world that we can do so much as by adorning our profession by our practice, and holding forth to the world the good and lovely fruits of this work of God. Second, let it be considered that the truth of this work has been from the beginning, and is to this very day, very much suspected in the country. There never was a work of this nature in the country so much taken notice of, and that there has been so much talked of, but it has not been generally and fully received as true. At the first beginning, when it was first heard of in the country, it was suspected from the extraordinariness of the thing, and afterwards people had their suspicions increased by the stories they heard, partly by those stories that were true, and partly by those that were false and groundless. But to this very day the country is not convinced, and there seems to have been two principal reasons of it. One is those devices and attempts of Satan that have already been mentioned, and another is that there seems to be a strong prejudice in a great part of the country against any work of such a nature. They are strangers to it, they don't know what it means. It has been a degenerate, dead time so long in the country that vital religion and the power of godliness seems to be grown a shy stranger in many places. In the first times of the country, such things were common, and such a work as this then would not have met with such prejudices in men's minds against it. But there has been so great a decay of the power of religion so long in the country, that the country has in a great measure forgot the language. It is strange kind of talk to them. The very notion of such powerful works of God's Spirit seem to be raced out of their minds, and the country seems in a great part of it to be got into another way of thinking of things of religion, looking chiefly at morality and a sober life. And then another great prejudice in the country has been the late extraordinary growth of Arminianism, or doctrines that savour of it, especially amongst those that are set to teach others. But the natural tendency of those doctrines is to make men have such things as have lately been experienced and talked of amongst us in the greatest contempt. Persons of such principles do commonly make a scoff and derision of them. But it being so that there is so great a suspicion of the truth of this work, it behooves this town, that has been especially the subject of this work, to do their utmost to give evidences of the truth of it. And there is no other way that we can do it but by honouring our profession and showing the truth of it by our practice. There is no other way that we can be likely to convince such persons. There are multitudes in the country that have already concluded that the work is nothing, and they stand ready to hear of our miscarriages and declensions to confirm their opinion, and would gladly catch at anything of that nature. And others that have not concluded yet have greatly suspected, who would be confirmed and settled down into it, that it is nothing by only hearing a few reports of this nature. When a person has already a suspicion, the mind stands ready to catch and receive impressions from everything that seems to confirm it. A few of this nature will turn a strong suspicion into downright conclusions. Third, consider what a good effect the report of the work of God has already had in places where it has been credited. The effect has been very extraordinary and wonderful, and the main thing that has seemed to hinder the yet greater progress of this work has been that the truth of it has not been believed, where it has been drunk in that this work was the work of God. We have seen that it has had a powerful influence to awaken many, and has issued in the saving conversion of multitudes, and the ill thought or the suspicion that the country have had of it seems to have been the main impediment to its having the like effect more extensively. It concerns us therefore to do our utmost to remove that impediment, which can be done no way so effectually as by its being apparent in the eyes of the country, that there is a good and lasting effect and fruit of the work appearing in our lives and conversations. Fourth, many of the more prudent sort of people have suspended their judgments of this work till they could see what the effect would be on our lives and conversation. This has been the case without doubt with many natural men, who, though they were stranger to any such work in their own hearts, yet from their moral prudence have at once concluded against it, that it was not of God, like Gamaliel, Acts 5 verse 38. And this also doubtless has been the case of some godly people that dwell in distant parts, that have not had opportunity to see what the work was, and did not know what to make of it from what they heard, and have suspended their judgments, concluding that they should be better able to pass a judgment afterward, when it should be seen and known what the effect of it would be in their lives and conversations, have concluded within themselves that if the work was not of God, it would come to nothing, and would appear to be nothing, by the fruits that should be brought forth. This seems to have been the case with many in the country. Certainly, therefore, it stands it in hand not to fail of giving of them that evidence of the truth of the work which they have waited for, and to let them see those signs of the reality of our profession by our holy and Christian and amiable practice, so that they need neither to suspend their judgments any longer, nor think that they have any cause to determine against us. Fifth, If we don't adorn our profession by our practice, we shall disappoint them that have believed this work to be a work of God. Though there have been multitudes in the country that have doubted of the truth of this work, and many that have spake against it, yet there has been a number that have believed it. There have been some such in all parts of the country. By what they have heard, they have concluded it was a real and wonderful work of God, and they have stood up in defence of it against those that have opposed it. But if they hear that our carriage is notably unsuitable to our profession, if they hear that persons seem to return again in a considerable measure to their old ways, and the young people grow disorderly again, and there seems to be prevailing of a very unchristian spirit in the town, a spirit of contention and strife, a very niggardly, narrow and private spirit, or the like, we shall dreadfully disappoint them. We shall doubtless stumble them. They won't know what in the world to make of it. They'll begin to fear whether they were not too sudden and hasty in their charity for us. They have pleaded for us hitherto, and stood up for us against our adversaries. But if such things be reported of us, and we give occasion for it, we shall stop their mouths. They won't know what to say, nor what to think. Wise and prudent and godly people will doubtless be greatly stumbled by it, and we shall wound the charity even of the best people in the land, and those whose charity and good opinion is most to be valued. They will think that they have warrant to doubt, from Christ's own rule, Matthew 7 verse 16. You shall know them by their fruits. 6th, people in the country are now often inquiring how those that were looked upon to be lately converted behave themselves. 'Tis a question that I am very often asked where I go by ministers and others. The country in general have been waiting to see, and they are very inquisitive about it, and I expect still to be asked the same question. Let me entreat of you that I may always have a good account to give. You may be sure that I am disposed to give you the best when I am thus inquired of. I should be glad to be able to say that such persons as make a profession of special experiences amongst us do adorn their profession by a very excellent walk. They seem to be truly of a very amiable and Christian spirit and behaviour, and I should be glad to tell them that the glorious effects of the work of God are to be seen in the town, in that we dwell all in peace and love, that there is nothing of any disorder amongst young people, nor nothing of any party spirit or spirit of contention, but that all public affairs seem to be managed with love and meekness, and that there is an harmonious, sweet agreement amongst all sorts of people, and that people in general are most evidently altered in being abundantly of a more free spirit to do for God, and to part with the world for pious and charitable uses and the like. Such a report as this would wonderfully confirm people's minds in the goodness of that late work amongst us, and the goodness of our profession. Let me therefore entreat you all that there may be such a report truly carried, and such an answer truly given to all that inquire. Here I may apply the words of the Apostle, 2 Corinthians 9, 3-4. Yet have I sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this behalf, that as I said, ye may be ready, lest haply if they of Macedonia come with me, and find you unprepared, we, that we say not ye, should be ashamed in this same confident boasting. 7th, people abroad have heard of those things that have happened amongst us, that have been any blemish to our profession, and take great notice of them. What has fallen out that has been matter of scandal, people abroad have heard of it, to the great wounding of the credit of the glorious work of God amongst us. I have heard such things mentioned abroad, and have been inquired of about them, and have perceived that they have been spoken of to our disparagement. And those circumstances have been all rehearsed now that were most aggravating, and that rendered them peculiarly dishonourable to this work. And no wonder, for we are a city that is set up on a hill, and such a city can't be hid. We must not expect to hide our blemishes, and those things that might be matter of reproach to us or our profession, they will be known, and we can't hide them. What there has been of this nature already is known, and is improved to our dishonour, as well as the dishonour of religion. And if there should be anything hereafter, if some of our young people that pretend to be converted should be found in any notable wickedness, or any other pretenders to special experience should be guilty of scandal, or there should be any public disorder or contention, or any such thing, it will be known. The birds of the air will carry it, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. It will spread about swiftly. There are many that watch to hear of such things amongst us, and if they once get hold of it, they will improve it to the utmost. Let what has happened in time past be a warning to us, that the enemy may have nothing from us for an occasion to reproach us, and reproach religion from time to come. Again, 8. What has been wrought amongst us, and the profession we make, has been much taken notice of even beyond the bounds of this country. I have had special opportunity to know in the journey that I took the last fall. They have heard much of it in New York, and there were many people that there were inquisitive about it. I there met with some that belonged to the Jerseys, and particularly a minister that lives in those parts, and they informed me that they had heard much of it in those parts, and that many people took great notice of it there. Ministers there mentioned it in their pulpits, as I saw in a printed sermon that was preached in the Jerseys, and those that I saw that belonged there were very inquisitive about it. And so upon Long Island, from one end of it to the other, they talked much of it and asked me particularly about it. And since I came home, I have had a letter from a minister in the Jerseys informing me how much they have heard there about it, and desiring me to send him a particular account, and another from the Highlands on Hudson's River, signifying that they had heard of it there, and everywhere this town is principally mentioned and inquired of. And not only so, but this wonderful work has been heard of and taken much notice of in England. One of the ministers of London some time since wrote over to the Reverend Dr. Coleman of Boston, signifying to him his rejoicing to hear the tidings of such a wonderful work of God in this land. And since that, very lately, he and another minister of London, both doctors of divinity and very eminent divines, have written over again, desiring to be informed how it is now amongst us. And how much to be lamented is it that they can't be informed that the work of God still continues gloriously to be carried on amongst us, and that there still remains an extraordinary lively and earnest spirit for religion in the midst of us. 'Tis to be expected that we shall yet further be inquired of. The world seems to be inquisitive about the progress and issue of the work, and probably those London divines will yet further inquire about us. And what 1,000 pities is it that they should hear anything of us but what tends to confirm their good opinion of the work, and to increase their joy in it. Certainly 'tis our duty to take notice of these things. God and all mankind will condemn us if we don't. What a pity is it but that the news of this glorious work of God should be carried abroad into distant parts of the world without any bad report joined with it, to be a blemish to it. Oh, what a pity is it but that they should hear that our fruits are answerable, that there is a lasting wonderful alteration in our practice, and the wolf now dwells with the lamb, Isaiah 11 verse 6. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. How much would this be to our honour as well to the honour of religion? And 'tis very likely, if there be no reports carried to wound the credit of this work, but on the contrary, that it will have a tendency to give some revival of religion, even in other countries, and I believe has had that effect some measure already. Who can conceive what obligations lie upon us to be careful of our walk, and how shall we provoke God and bring guilt on ourselves if we are not? And how might God justly hereafter set us forth to be an example of his judgments, as he has to be an instance of his wonderful mercy. Ninth and lastly, consider how much it will be not only to the discredit of this particular work of God, but of all that kind of religion that we profess, if we don't walk according to our profession. It won't only make other people that behold us and hear of us question the truth of this work, but it will prejudice all talk or pretences of such a work of conversion as we profess the necessity of it, and against all such experiences of the operations of the Spirit. The land and the world are grown of late very much into prejudice against such sorts of things. It is quite contrary to that divinity that is lately elsewhere fashionable. And now in this work there has been a notable instance given to the world of that which they are thus prejudiced against, and their eyes are very much drawn to see what this will come to. And if they see that there be not answerable fruits, it will exceedingly confirm to them in their rejecting of all such things, as being nothing but mere whimsy and enthusiasm. They have cried it down before, but then they will cry it down a great deal more. They will think they have demonstration against it. They will say, there is the people at Northampton that experience so much of such sort of things. See what it comes to. And so all vital religion will suffer and come into discredit by our miscarriages. It seems so to be ordered in Providence at present, that not only our own credit and the credit of the late work of God amongst us, but the credit of all vital religion and the power of godliness in this land depends very much on the behaviour of the people in this town, for the interest of religion depends on outward means. Let me hence take occasion earnestly to address myself to all sorts amongst us, to consider these things and to lay that weight on them that is due to them. And oh, that it might be the earnest care of everyone to his utmost to watch over himself. Let us consider that the world has heard so much of a wonderful work of God amongst us, that they don't merely expect to hear of things that are negative amongst us, and that we are a preferred people, but they will expect to hear something positive. What a good spirit there appears amongst us. How ready are we to do good works, how ready to deny ourselves, how forward to promote any good design, how charitable and how public-spirited we be, how ready to lay out our substance for the poor or for the worship of God and the like. I would entreat that there may be such a spirit as this manifest in the management of our public affairs, and not a backward, loath, fearful spirit, in that is good, and over fearfulness, lest we should spend too much, a disposition and aptness to quarrel for our money, lest too much of it should be laid out for public designs, and especially for the honour of God's public worship, and an aptness to have our spirits something on an edge, in opposition to them that differ from us in opinion, or are endeavouring to carry a contrary design. These things don't become a people that are as a city set on a hill, in the manner that we are. And let me entreat that God may be honoured, and Christianity adorned in families. Let family orders and family religion be strictly kept up and attended, and don't let us have any custom of breaking of it, by being unseasonably absent from our home a nights, or anything of that nature, and don't let us return to those disorders that we have forsaken, to frequenting the tavern, to night walking and frolicking and rioting, and licentious company keeping, to contending and quarrelling. Don't let us as the dog return to this vomit, or as the sow that was washed to wallowing in this filthy mire. And here I would particularly direct myself to our young people. You are a generation that I hope are blessed of the Lord. I cannot but hope that many of you are beloved of God, are the objects of the dear love of God and the dying love of the Lord Jesus. That great blessing that God has lately poured out on this town, though it has descended on all sorts, yet has fallen more remarkably on your generation. Let me beseech you to hold fast that which you have received, whereunto you have attained in escaping the pollutions of the world, therein abide. Don't return to any disorders and licentious practices, or anything that is not of good report. Show yourselves ready to hearken to come and set as you have done, that you may be a generation to God's praise. Don't esteem the service of God your burden. Serve the Lord, and you will find that you serve a good master. Walk in wisdom's ways, and you will find you lose no pleasure by it. When you are together, let your company be beautiful and sweetened with religion and virtue, and in no wise tainted or sullied with anything vicious or extravagant. I hope that many of you are the children of God. Oh, let me pray you to walk as becomes such. Walk not as the children of darkness, but as the children of the light and of the day. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 5. Ye are all the children of light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Ephesians 5 verse 8. For ye were sometimes darkness, but now are ye light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. Love the Lord with all your hearts. Let him be the object of your highest love. And whatever love or friendship there be amongst you in any one towards another, let all be sanctified with the love of God. And whatever company you keep one with another, let it not be marred and defiled by any manner of thing in word or deed that is lewd or unchaste or unseemly. Let virtue and Christianity rule in your company keeping, and let your society be improved for religious discourse. This will make your company and conversation together sweet to you in the time of it, and not only so, but sweet in your reflections on it, and sweet in the fruits of it. And you will find that nothing makes earthly love and company so sweet as to the love of God and the exercise of virtue and piety.